There are some sentences that, well, everyone just knows them. And this is definitely one of them. But what if I told you that a whole lot of people might be missing the real point? Not because the words themselves are complicated, but because we've ripped the verse completely out of its original context, the real, mind-blowing meaning. It's all hidden in the tense, late-night conversation happening right before it. So, let's get into it.
Yep, John 3:16. You've seen it everywhere, right? On signs, at sporting events, the works. But to really, truly grasp its power, we have to hit the rewind button. We need to go back just a little bit in the conversation and figure out what the actual debate was even about.
And this is the central question, really. Who is the world? Is Jesus making a promise here for one specific nation, for an exclusive group of people? Or is he saying something way more universal and honestly way more disruptive? The answer starts to unfold when you look at the setting.
All right, so here's our first big clue. To unlock this verse, we have to understand where and when this conversation is taking place. See, it's not happening in a vacuum. It is absolutely soaked in a very specific national story. So first off, who's even in the room? You have to realize this is an internal debate. It's Jesus, an Israelite, talking to Nicodemus, a guy who is literally called a master of Israel. I mean, this is a top religious scholar. And where are they? They're in Jerusalem during Passover, the huge festival celebrating Israel's liberation and its birth as a nation. This is not a casual chat. This is two Jewish leaders digging into their nation's history and its destiny. And the parallels to that first Passover are, well, they're just uncanny. Nicodemus comes to Jesus at night, just like the original Passover angel came at night. He brings up Jesus' signs and wonders. And for any master of Israel, that phrase is like a giant flashing neon sign pointing right back to Moses and the signs he performed during the Exodus. The whole scene is just saturated with this theme of national birth. So here's the crucial point. The Exodus is the defining moment for Israel. It's their origin story. It's their birthday as a nation. And that historical memory is basically the soundtrack playing in the background of this whole conversation. You have to hear that music to really get what Jesus says next.
And this brings us to one of the most debated phrases in this whole chapter. Jesus tells Nicodemus he has to be born of water and the Spirit. Now, a lot of people hear water, and their minds immediately jump to baptism. But if we stay in that Exodus context, the evidence points somewhere else entirely. So try to put yourself in Nicodemus's shoes for a second. You're a master of Israel. What does born of water mean to you? The answer isn't some future Christian ritual. No, it's buried deep in the story of his own people. And this is the key. Scholars like Timothy Foster argue, very convincingly, that born of water is a direct reference to the birth of the nation of Israel. When did that happen? When they passed through the waters of the Red Sea. They were, in a very real and symbolic way, born as a nation out of the water.
And this isn't just some wild theory. The Old Testament itself uses this exact kind of language. In Exodus, right before the Great Escape, God explicitly calls the nation of Israel my firstborn son. See the connection? The nation is called a son, and that son experiences a birth through water. Okay, and this is where the conversation takes a radical turn. For Nicodemus, this would have been deeply challenging. Jesus essentially looks at this expert in Israelite identity and tells him, you know that national birthright you're so proud of? That identity is one born of water? It's not enough anymore. Let's just break down the logic here. First, Jesus acknowledges Nicodemus's identity. He says, yep, you were born of water, you're an Israelite. But then he drops the bombshell. In this new messianic age, that national identity is totally inadequate. A second birth is required, a spiritual one. And that comes from shifting your entire allegiance away from the nation of Israel and onto the person of the Messiah. As Dr. Michael Heiser puts it, this is the core challenge. The entire center of gravity for salvation is moving. It's no longer about belonging to a specific group of people. It's about believing in a specific person. So with all of this as the backdrop, the Passover, the Exodus, the birth of a nation, and the shocking idea that this national birth is no longer enough, we finally arrive at the climax of the conversation. After this intensely Israel-focused discussion, Jesus uses the Greek word cosmos. And this word choice is brilliant because it totally illustrates the shift. Cosmos doesn't mean the people of Israel. It refers to the entire created order, all of humanity. And often, it means humanity in a state of rebellion against God. It is never used in the New Testament to mean just one nation.
Can you just imagine the shock for Nicodemus? This man, a teacher of Israel, his entire worldview was built on the unique status of his nation. And then he hears that God's covenant love wasn't just for them, but for the entire rebellious cosmos. It would have been an absolute thunderbolt. It redefines the very scope of God's entire plan. And as theologian D.A. Carson points out, the wonder of John 3:16 isn't just that God loved such a big world, but that he loved such a bad world. In John's gospel, the cosmos isn't a neutral term. It represents humanity in its opposition to God, and that is who God came to save. So, what is this all building toward? Well, this contextual reading reveals that Jesus is announcing something massive, a new and even greater exodus. So let's just recap the keys that unlock this thing. You have the Passover setting, which frames the whole conversation in national terms. You have the water metaphor, pointing back to Israel's national birth. Then Jesus declares that birthright is now insufficient. Loyalty has to shift to the Messiah. And finally, the word world just blasts the scope of salvation wide open to everyone everywhere. So what we're really seeing is a tale of two exoduses. The first one, through water, created one national people, Israel. But this new exodus, through the Spirit, it creates a new people drawn from all nations, defined not by their bloodline, but by their belief in the Son. This is the ultimate takeaway. The very center, the heart of salvation has shifted. Belonging to a nation, any nation, is no longer the path. Believing in Jesus is. And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. The first Exodus took one group of people out of one nation, Egypt, and made them into a new nation. So what does this greater spiritual exodus, which draws people out of the entire rebellious world, create today? It's a question that challenges any view that tries to limit salvation by bloodline and forces us all to answer the revolutionary question at the very heart of John 3:16.